So, good morning, everybody. A big welcome from me and to all those who are joining us online. I don't know how many you are, but we're very grateful for your participation, and I hope you can catch everything almost as if you were here. That would be wonderful. So thank you, too, for those who made the extraordinary journey down from Birmingham. Very brave of you, very noble. So thank you so much for investing all that effort. I heard 3 carloads, right? 3 cars. Wonderful. So let me just see if I get a good image on this. Excellent. So my first presentation, first of 3 today, which just give a little insight into the thought and the teaching and some of the ideas behind the Universal Peace Federation and everything which is going on, that you see going on, or perhaps you are involved in. A little more, explanation about where that comes from, and a little window into other areas of this thought, the more kind of theological, philosophical, these kind of areas which have their own importance. And it's there really for your interest, and thank you for responding to that. Of course, UPF is I think the term is non-confessional organization, so we welcome people of all faiths or of no particular faith. We embrace and value the real contribution of conscientious and peace-loving citizens. It's so important that we work together, as Dr. Earle expressed. This is where we get our strength and our power, and that means all of you. So it's really a testimony to you, really, that we can meet like this. No one is asked to adhere to a certain set of beliefs. I think actually that's one of the strengths of UPF, and yet it is profoundly spiritual in origin and respectful of religious traditions, and becomes a kind of a vehicle for people of different faiths to work together. So it's tremendously important in this way. And yet, interestingly, I can't help but notice it naturally attracts people of kind of like mind and of real personal integrity. Sounds a little like a mutual appreciation society, doesn't it? But it always amazes me, Yeah, it's natural. It's not, nobody is kind of vetted or, has to be quizzed before they can become an ambassador for peace or, work with UPF. And yet, naturally, maybe it's because of some of the people who are running it, the Robins and the Margarets of this world, and Mr. Keith Best and everybody who's kind of naturally, people want to associate with something which reflects the things that they're interested in and concerned with, and it's very beautiful to see. Our founders, Reverend and Mrs. Moon, they're known, within the movement especially, as the true parents, and kind of increasingly even outside of those circles, and they are primarily and have been religious leaders. They've shared, and they continue to share, profound insights, really, through their personal relationship with God and knowledge of the spiritual reality. And I'm sure that this knowledge is resonating with you in some way, and I really appreciate that. I'm going to start with a little something interesting here. It's just something to focus our minds on the bigger picture, I suppose. And can you work out what's going on here? I found this very intriguing when I first saw it. It's a graphic produced by NASA, and that little precious blue ball that you see over a rather dry-looking planet Earth, that is actually the size of the globe or the sphere that would result if you put all the surface water of the Earth together. So we think of the oceans as so vast and so deep, but actually they're quite shallow compared to the size of the Earth. And if you put them all together, that is what it is. It's almost like a teardrop, isn't it? Right? So it gives you a sense of, how fragile our planet is, actually. And it's only us as human beings who are bringing a lack of harmony and balance to this beautiful planet and to each other as well. So that brings us to the kind of core of UPF work, which is, it does touch on the environment. We have those areas as well, which are very important. But it's always allied to the human factor. What are we doing and how are we coping with things together? UPF and the key to our future, of course, lies in people and in the way that we relate to each other and to our common home. So here in these presentations, really, we're concentrating more on the human factor. We can say that all institutions derive their quality, right, and character from the individuals who lead them. And they may be built on noble ideals, but they are influenced by the values and the integrity of those who make the decisions in those organizations. So human character there is shaped always by experiences in the family that people have grown up with, the educational system they've been through, and by the social, cultural, various religious influences in their life. So we look at this kind of big picture and these big influences. And why religion is often a focus is because it has a real contribution to make, very definitely. It rightly, I think, identifies that the solution to world peace and humanity's harmonious future, this lies very much within the individual. Peace starts with B, certainly, but it also starts with me. So that's a nice kind of catchy modern phrase, but it's actually telling the truth about the religious pursuit, wherever that has been practiced. It's always looking to the individual. Before I can think of changing the world, I have to change myself. I have to put myself right. And this is so essential, and I think so right as an approach to the problems that we face. In contrast, for example, the communist experiment, which lasted roughly 70 years, although it's still dragging on a bit, as an applied form of atheistic materialism, it resulted somewhere in between 75 and 150 million deaths. And that's not a clash between countries. It wasn't a world war, apart from the Cold War. And this kind of elimination of people within nations. So that kind of staggering statistic is almost too horrific for people to face, and you don't hear it referred to very much, do you? But this was an experiment into materialism and atheism, and what did it produce? Well, that is the result. Much wisdom has been passed on and down in religion through stories, and religious education really helps development of concepts in young people and an understanding of virtues. So it has been, in the past, making a very essential contribution, maybe less so in our current society. True religious practice, it seeks to restore peace, and it promotes certain things, such as humility in front of God and respect to parents, fidelity in marriage, loyalty, public service, these ideals, which also David O. was referring to. It emphasizes personal discipline, especially in the area of human relationships and love relationships, sacrifice and control of the physical desires, and restraint and patience and forgiveness in relationships. So it has so much to teach and to pass on to future generations. It also emphasizing loving others as you love yourself and loving your neighbors as well, even one's enemies. So it's a very powerful and essential force for putting things right, in my opinion, right? And maybe you share that. Here is a quotation from the Holy Quran. In a longer seminar, I would share many and more varied quotations from the extraordinary legacy of wisdom and insight that's found in our world scriptures and world religious traditions. I can only include a few here to show that the points I make are not new in terms of profound spiritual truth, but they're the expression of truth in a kind of updated form, or a form which is apt and appropriate for a new generation and for the future. So it's there to address our scientific age and to provide solutions to realistic problems. So I'll try to give you a taste of that as we go along. If your faith background is not specifically quoted, please don't take any inference from that. You know, I'd love to include everybody. It just happens to be a quotation applicable to what I've just said from the Holy Quran. But I also have to say, those of Islamic background, you might find that this isn't a very good translation, or we run into all kind of little mini minefields, don't we, when we try to do this. But please understand this with the best of intention. And here it says, prayer restrains one from shameful and unjust deeds, and resemblance of God is the greatest thing in life, without doubt. So this is the kind of essence there of what religion has to teach and to pass on and to do in terms of bringing control into the life and the love of any individual. So the Unification Principle, or Principles of Peace under UPF, what does it provide? Well, it's a new expression of religious truth for our age, as I've intimated. It opens the way, this way, for a harmonized view of religion and science. So it's seeking to make that bridge, and it identifies universal values that are present in the major world faiths and reveals God as a God of heart, we say. It's a little bit of a new expression, but why not, right? God is a God of heart, and identifies clearly the importance of human responsibility and puts appropriate emphasis on that, I believe. So it provides understanding for tackling those real problems, and also combines revelation with reason. And you'll find this in Father Moon's teaching. Much wisdom has been passed on and down in religion, largely through stories. It's a wonderful thing, isn't it, to pass those on to children and be steeped in that from an early age. Religious education really helps the development of concepts and the understanding of virtues in a young and growing mind, to bring out that humanity, that good person that my previous speaker talked about, right? So very essential in that way. Here's our founder talking at an assembly of the world's religions, which he founded back in 1985. And there he said, religions should be concerned with God's will for world salvation more than with the salvation of the individual or the welfare of their own denomination or group. As far as I know, God is not sectarian. He's not obsessed with minor details of doctrine. We should quickly liberate ourselves from theological conflict, which results from blind attachment to doctrines and rituals, and instead focus on living communication with God. Because in God's parental heart and his great love, there is no discrimination based on color or nationality. There are no barriers between countries or cultural traditions, east and west or north and south. So through interreligious dialogue and harmony, we should realize one ideal world of peace. Amen. Amen. Whatever you like to say to that. Yeah. Yay, right? I don't know. Whatever comes to you. So, we're talking about, unity based on universal values. We've introduced that, and we can look to the values that are common to the world's great religions and philosophies. And again, these are just symbolic representations of everything. I can't put every worthy religious tradition on there. But, the key is individual peace and individual happiness, becoming a responsible individual with integrity and developing a heart of love towards others. I put some of these pictures on because, having come from a religious education background, a few years foray into high school education as a religious education teacher, I was kind of dismayed to find that the examples held up were very few for children to learn about these good human beings, right? Yeah. There was Martin Luther King Jr., usually Gandhi was there, Mother Teresa, also Nelson Mandela, and then you start kind of, who else can we talk about, right? I don't think it should be that way. I don't think it is that way, actually. There are many unsung heroes, very precious and wonderful people who lived really saintly and godly lives, but we don't give them that kind of recognition, or maybe they didn't influence and impact the world in quite that way. But, everybody, these are not, something different to ordinary human beings, really. Is that fair to say? Right? They are flawed as well in their own way when you look at their histories and read their autobiographies. But, nevertheless, the potential is there in every person to be a great, positive peacemaker and someone who can influence, if not their family, their, even more than that, their community, their society, and really make a precious contribution. So that's part of what it is to be human. In the Unification Principles that we're sharing, we identify certain foundations for lasting peace and happiness. The first is really allocated to the individual, and we put it in a diagrammatic form this way. So every person consists of a mind and body. Those need to interact together harmoniously, centering on a common purpose and values, which, if we are taking a religious line, we can say are centered on God, on the origin, on the Creator. If that's difficult for somebody, then we can say, well, let's think about centering on higher values or a higher purpose, something that's common and there for the common good. So mind and body unity is encouraging a person to match their deeds with the highest words, really. And that makes a person of integrity. It's a person that can, just by their presence, have some lasting impact. And, in this system for the individual is where we can grow in character and really work to mature our heart, our ability to love and to receive love, and also develop our spiritual sensitivities, especially to the invisible spiritual realm and spiritual ideals and God himself. So we can, in that way, we can become a dwelling place of God, to use religious terminology, or a temple of God. And we can be able to receive and give good and genuine altruistic love. So this is the kind of starting point. This is why we say peace starts with me. Are you with me? Yes. Everybody? Fantastic. So more than that, we can talk about the nature of God, and the principle, as I call it, or the Unification Principles, talk about the nature of God. And God has internal character, emotion, intellect, will, also includes concepts and laws which operate in the universe. And they operate in a certain way, and there's an absoluteness to those laws and principles, such as you can't just change them at will, or nobody's going to be able to do that. So it's written into the very fiber and being of everything that exists. This is a very good starting point for, explaining a reasonable existence of God, right? Also, the principle allocates to the kind of center or core of this being we call God an aspect called heart. And I said that's a kind of new terminology, and I think it's quite useful to think about this. It comes from the revelation and reason of Father Moon and his experience. All that he's teaching is from his experience. So what is heart in this context? It's the impulse to experience joy through giving and receiving love. So it's saying even God had that before the creation process started, right? That means wanted an object to love and to receive love in return. So everything in this sense is based on a reciprocal relationship, and that is at the very core of everything which we see existing in the universe. It's a world full of interdependent relationships. And so heart is the source or the motivation for creating, and it therefore becomes a source of meaning because the purpose comes from the Creator and is invested into everything which is created. So in that way, it's the core of human nature. And the complete nature of God, the kind of more philosophical aspect of the principle, includes, it calls it an external form, but that's not a form you can see ever or ever will see. But God has, as well as the kind of deeper internal aspects, of which the most deep is this aspect of heart that gives rise to love, there's also a kind of original energy, or you can think of it as energy before it becomes energy in the universe. Where does it come from? Where does the essence of life come from? At the moment, scientists can't explain that actually, right? It's a peculiar thing, this thing called life. And yet it's always seeking to become more complex, right, and more developed, and to grow and to multiply. This life is going the opposite way to the Big Bang, if that's the theory that you espouse, right? Because, most explosions don't end this way, with a kind of force to build something up and to develop and to give life to new creatures. Where is that coming from? It must come from some input, right? So it's a very scientific approach to ask that question. And what is that input then? Where is that energy coming from? Where is that? And it's not just a kind of cold, undirected energy. It's actually purposeful and mindful. It's seeking to do something constructive. And these must come from, somewhere. They are not just random events. So, we could talk a day on that one, right? But, but I just want to give you a sense of, what is behind the things that you're encountering with, it's there, should you want to kind of investigate. And unificationism has developed through this systematic theology. It's there, if you want to look at it, in a comprehensive philosophical system of thought. We call it unification thought. And many kind of practical tools as well in the educational area. There's Causa, which is a critique and counterproposal to Marxism, which was very influential behind the scenes to bring down the kind of wall of communism and undermine its kind of false ideology. There's a whole system of teaching based on true family values, and this is being picked up by many areas of the movement. So, but the movement is acting as a catalyst, really, to draw people together. It's not saying we have all the answers, right? But it's drawing the people together who can together find the answers. And that's the power, really, of this organization, I believe. So to look just a little bit more at this, if I may, we say that within God, within this purposeful mind and heart behind everything in the universe, however we like to describe it, there are ideas, and already the kind of idea of what should be manifested or should be created. In God, they exist as united or harmonized subject-object pairs. But when anything is created, if we look at any level of the existing natural world, including human beings, they always exist in subject-object pairs. Have you noticed that? Like men and women, right? Or like mind and body in the individual. This kind of pairing of subject and object. Subject in this context means like initiating, and object is more responding. And in the case of, two human beings, of course, that's very dynamic relationship. But, from that you can get the essence of what makes a good conversation, right? You need, at one time, somebody who's ready to speak and share ideas. At the same time, you need a person who's ready to listen, right? And that person eventually gets an opportunity where they can become subject and share their ideas built on what has been shared together. So if this is working well, this kind of harmonious relationship, then good ideas pop out, right? And good development takes place. And after a good conversation, sometimes you look at each other, don't you, and say, where did that idea come from, right? Was it from you? No, I thought it was from you, you know? It kind of comes. So this is the creative process happening, right? So in this process, there is the kind of, those white arrows are this kind of idea of original energy or pre-energy, which God is investing, right, into everything. And it moves subject and object to relate together. Are you with me? Yeah? And that means each subject-object pair is engaged in a relationship of initiating and responding. And as it says in the principle, the universal prime energy, as it calls it, is the origin of all energies and forces that allow created beings to exist. They're there for existence, multiplication, and action. They come out of positive interchanges between these subject-object pairs. Did you think you'd be hearing this morning? I hope it's not putting you off at all, right? I won't do much more of this, don't worry. So this process of give and take in relationship produces value. This is where it comes from, the harmonious interaction of these subject-object pairs, whether it's my mind and body, or whether it's a husband and wife, or two individuals, or people and the rest of nature. It's producing love, it's producing truth, it's producing beauty, it's producing goodness. It's giving rise to these qualities in everything which is done, which is a wonderful thing. And as I already kind of hinted at, the principle is saying that God himself needs an object to love. So he's a subject, the subject of all subjects. But it's no good just sitting there by yourself. You want someone to love. And the highest kind of object of God's love is human beings, right? Would you agree? Yeah. So that means we are the recipient of this love, first and foremost. And what should we do with that? Naturally, as with the love you receive from your parents, you want to return it, don't you? It's a kind of lifelong, natural thing to do, actually. If you've received genuine love, you just want to return that. How is our love returned to God? Well, in religious circles, we use the term beauty, right? Luckily, it doesn't mean physical beauty. Otherwise, I'd be out of it, right? No, but, you know, it's something else. It's inner beauty. So what is inner beauty? Where does that kind of come from? Or how can we show that inner beauty? Well, we see such things as filial piety and loyalty and faithfulness and trustworthiness and honesty and humility. Wait a minute, isn't this what the world's religions are teaching? Yeah, it is, isn't it? So it's how to be, you know, a beautiful kind of object to God and return beauty to God in response to the love that we receive, which is given to us freely, right? It's nothing that we do from ourselves. So this is the kind of principle that we're talking about in the first section, what we call principles of creation. And it creates a world which is full of complementary pairs. Just to go briefly through this, we see that there's a pair system on a kind of internal nature between mind and heart and body in human beings, instinct and body in animals. Plants have their own kind of inherent directive nature, which makes them do what they do. They have a kind of rudimentary mind, actually. And they have a body made up of cells. Also, on the mineral level and on the kind of atomic level and subatomic level, we see also inherent directive nature, which is working together with some kind of matter or energy. So that's, again, a paired relationship. Wherever we go, we find these smaller and smaller paired relationships. And there's another set of paired relationships, which is that between male and female. In humans, that's what it is. In animals also. And in plants, we have these same kind of characteristics. And also, when you look on the more molecular level, we see, positivity and negativity, or positive ions and negative ions. We see this. The revelation of principle is saying that actually that is like a very kind of rudimentary level masculinity and femininity. Two words I find difficult to get my mouth around, right? Right? Isn't that interesting?
Yes,
No, it's absolutely goes through everything. So in that you can start to feel that, this is not just a social construct, masculinity, femininity. It's something very deep, actually. It's written into the very fiber and being of the universe and everything which is out there. So, we maybe mess with that at our peril, I would say. I won't say any more on that at the moment. But let's move on. We talked about the kind of individual, and becoming a temple of God, or a person who's a person of integrity. And once we can come to a certain level of individual spiritual maturity, that's where we would want to naturally find a partner in life, right? This is the natural desire that people experience. And to make peace in human society, the next kind of foundation of peace is the family. And the family involves the same kind of common purpose to unite around and source of values, which we, for shorthand, I'm calling God here. And then it's a relationship between husband and wife in a dynamic subject-object relationship that can, in a loving environment, produce and raise children who themselves are in the image of the Creator. And this is the kind of considered in UPF's teaching as the kind of fundamental building block, if you like, of anything like an ideal world, or in religious terms, a kingdom of heaven, whatever we like to call it. If we want to see an ideal and better society, it absolutely has to be founded on these ideals that are contained in the family. So the family is the building block, and any being as such is, interdependent and created to exist through the kind of reciprocal relationships that I've been talking about today. So putting all this together, you could say any created being looks something like this. It has an internal character, an external form, has positivity and negativity, or masculinity and femininity. That's the effect. Where does that come from? It must come from some origin or creator. So God has these characteristics also. This is a principle of resemblance, as we call it. And in this pair system is the kind of fundamental idea of living for the sake of others. You've heard that little mantra, right? And that's where it comes from, really. It's again written into the principles of the universe, between mind and body, between husband and wife, between parent and child, between government and people. That's how it should be. And between human beings and the environment. That's also how it should be, right? The pair system, living for the sake of others and for the kind of mutual benefit of both combined. So where is it that we primarily learn about true love in our life? First and foremost, it's from our parents, right? They're our first teachers, whoever is born into this world. The family is, as we say, the school of love. It's there to nurture heart and character, and a primary training ground for all future relationships that such a person is going to be involved in. So the quality of that is very important, right? It's very formative. And where do we learn this? In relating to brothers and sisters and parents and grandparents. It's in the dynamic system of relationships, which we call the human family. So it's also a school of morality. The basis of right and wrong is inculcated there in the individual. And then becomes the basis of societal norms and a person's proper conduct in the wider world, where eventually, as we grow up, we leave the safe confines of the family, and parents, encourage you to go out and put into good practice everything that you've hopefully learnt and inherited from them. It's still a risky business, isn't it, parents, right? But, this is what we're hoping for, and this is what the human heart is naturally kind of created to respond to. So I find, even adults saying to me, I never thought to do that because I don't think my parents would have approved, right? Yeah. It's a very powerful kind of force on one's conscience, isn't it? And especially if you come to love and admire your parents because they, to you, are people of integrity, then that keeps you going. It's actually to do with the development of conscience in the individual. So, where do we learn this true love? It's through the experience between husband and wife, seeing God in the other. You know how they say when often you see an elderly couple, they've grown to look like each other? Have you heard that? Yeah, I think it's true. I think that's the exchange of love, actually. And if, as a husband, you're loving your wife as you should do, she becomes more and more beautiful. Wouldn't you say that, gentlemen? Yes. Married gentlemen? Right. Yeah, it's true. So we respond to each other in love this way. So strong families, have a focus of kind of something higher. And that's part of the education that families are there to pass on, especially families kind of engage in this if they're part of a wider religious community, because it's there for the taking, really, and for the example is there. So, able to inherit a kind of sense of altruistic purpose in serving the community. And the principle talks about the kind of 4 great loves which are experienced and learnt within the family. Children's love, siblings' love, spouses' love, and parents' love. And if you put, God, husband, wife, and child together, there are 12 different relationships going on there, because the relationship is two-way, right, by definition. So each has a different quality to it. The husband-wife love is exclusive. If someone comes along to disturb that, they are not welcome, right? And they should know that. But if parental love seeks to multiply, a person who has one child loves that child 100%, right? If they have 10 children, do they love each 10% each? No. You love each child 100%, right? That's the kind of mystery. It's a different dimension of love that's operating there. Let me also inject a few words from the founder, because I think it says it better than I could, obviously. So in the family, there are 4 levels: grandfather and grandmother, father and mother, you and your spouse, and your sons and your daughters. The world is the extension of these relationships. Thus, you need to love the people of the world whose ages are similar to the people in your family, in the same way that you love your family members. That's why we call it a school of love, actually. And the family with love at its core is the foundation upon which each of its members bonds with others, moves and acts. A family is based on love. We see this supported in the world's religious traditions, right? In the Bible, in the New Testament, it says, whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. This is the idea of, putting someone else even before yourself and loving that person as you would want to be loved. In the Holy Quran, it says, do not expect in giving any increase for yourself. So you're not looking for some gain, even though in giving, selflessly, that is where we if we don't listen to the lie that we're going to lose out, we actually find that this is actually the basis of our happiness, right? So people may be reluctant to do that, but actually you deny yourself in the end. In the Bhagavad Gita, even in Hinduism, of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed by those who desire no reward is the nature of goodness. This is the quality which we're talking about. And in Sikhism, in the Adi Granth, says, what is that love which is based on greed? When there is greed, the love is false. Right? In Father and Mother Moon's ministry, worldwide effort to promote marriage and family, one of the largest kind of gatherings, apart from online gatherings, which were much greater, was this in the Seoul Olympic Stadium in 1992. 30,000 couples there. For some it was their wedding day, and for others it was having a renewal of their marriage vows and God's blessing on their marriage. What a beautiful thing, isn't it? All those white dots are wedding dresses. Right? Quite extraordinary. But this is a very public statement that marriage and family are important. And for each person, it was a very precious moment to be involved in. It has been that the great religious traditions of the world have been and continue to be at the forefront of upholding really the ideals of marriage and family. And I think they don't get enough credit for that very often. But the Family Federation for World Peace and UPF, these are kind of sister organizations, recognize that there's an important foundation for world peace in marriage and family, which is actually not only key for attaining world peace, but it's really the only institution founded by God. It's something very, very fundamental that should not be abandoned at great peril, as I say. At that religious wedding, that beautiful blessing of marriages, there were prayers from different faiths and a blessing from different faiths. This is our true parents, Reverend Mrs. Moon's ideal, is to have that. And it's wonderful that these religious leaders came together for that purpose and in a way to bestow the blessings from their traditions as well. So you have Buddhist, Sikh, Druze, Muslim, Native American, Hindu, and Christian there, all participating. The third foundation for peace is to do with our relationship with the natural world, and that means we need to develop a responsible dominion through love in caring for our environment, that material prosperity should be there for the mutual benefit of everybody, and that science and technology indeed should benefit human beings and the rest of the natural world. So this is how to develop the heart of true ownership and responsible stewardship, which obviously doesn't need at all any element of greed or exploitation or self-centeredness. So that is why the spiritual foundations that come before are so important. The individual and the family, and then the kind of heart to appreciate our position in the rest of the natural world and preserve it for future generations. So we derive, of course, great joy from our interaction with the natural world and depend upon it for our life and our future. So nature provides us with beauty to stimulate our senses and materials with which we can express and develop our creativity. And we should value these precious gifts and become responsible owners. Back in the New Testament, to use a quotation from Christianity, you have St. Paul saying, I think very profoundly for his age, right? The creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. And of course that means daughters of God as well, right? That means he could see that there's a kind of suffering there on the part of the natural world because people are not the mature, spiritually mature individuals that they should be. We've still got a way to go. So, don't we all want to be good?
Yes.
Margaret's a champion for that, right? Absolutely, absolutely. So, to be doing good, the principle is saying 3 things have to line up. Oh, yeah, when I'm teaching young people, this is where their ears perk up, right? That's interesting. First of all, we need a right motivation, a good motivation. Why are you engaging in this? Why are you starting out on this direction? And not only that, you need to have an aim in mind. So you need a good purpose, right? That is where this kind of relationship to that original purpose or mind and heart behind everything is so important to get everything in the proper order. But that's not enough, right? We need what the principle calls a good direction. We need to do things in the right way, ethically, morally. We need to pursue it, and we need to put our efforts, out there in the right direction. And that connects these three things. Within that scheme, we have a huge kind of freedom and creativity to do what we like. That's why I tend not to think of the unification teaching or principle as doctrine. It's much more than that. It's talking about universal truths and principles which are there for everybody and which you will see embedded and reflected in religious teachings all around the world. And I hope I brought that out a little bit. And, I am, of course, hugely biased, but my observation is that UPF naturally brings together good people, right? And it's very interesting to me how that happens. So, when we put these three foundations together, what do we see? We see this foundation for individual peace, for peace in the family and society, for universal peace. These three ideas are not new. Of course, they're not new. In fact, if you're familiar with the kind of Abrahamic teaching, with the Old Testament, if you're a Jew and the Torah is important to you, if you're a Christian and the Old Testament is part of your kind of Holy Bible, if you're a Muslim and the Quran has echoes of this as well, then you will see this kind of phrase used even near the very beginning, where God gives three great blessings to our first human ancestors and says, "Be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion over the earth." That's a simple expression in a way, isn't it? But what it's doing, do you recognize the kind of, this is being unlocked actually by this kind of understanding. What does it really mean to be fruitful, to multiply, which isn't just a mere kind of multiplication? How do we multiply? What are we multiplying? What is the process of development through love in the family? And then, having dominion, the right kind of stewardship and ownership over the rest of the created world. So it's there, And I say that because, no such truth is new, but the expression of that truth is new, and in its new expression, it can become very helpful when it comes to teaching and passing on. Everything that we want for our happiness is in this scheme. I challenge you to find something that's not, right? It's an expression, really, of our God-given purpose of life. And I think, we don't decide our own purpose. Rather, we are made to operate within these parameters and principles. And it's only when we stray outside of those that we lose something of our freedom, and we lose something of our dignity and integrity, and we even end up limiting the freedoms of others. But some of this I will go into later. So thank you so much for listening, and that concludes the first session. Thank you. God bless you.